ॐ सदाशिवसमारम्भां शङ्कराचार्यमध्यमाम् अस्मदाचार्यपर्यन्तां वन्दे गुरुपरम्पराम्। ॐ सहना भवतु, सहनौ भुनक्तु, सह वीर्यङ्करवावहै, तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। हरि ओम् श्रीगुरुभ्यो नमः। Okay. Let us share the screen. And does anyone want to volunteer reading? If somebody doesn't mind, because it'll be easier for me to switch back and forth between Q and A if someone else can read. Nikita, it's been a while. Do you want to go? You're on mute.
Hariom, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so
So we can
so
read
we can
from here and continue.
the facts of insecurity. That I am insecure is a fact, and that I seek securities is also a fact. That which I consider secure is not secure because it's also finite. This too is a fact. You may think that by giving away whatever securities you have, you will become secure. One man did this. He gave away his house, his business, and his bank balance and went to a Swami. But the Swami was also insecure and wanted to have a following of disciples. Previously, the man was on a husband trip, a father trip, a business money trip, and now is on another trip, a Swami Atma trip, minus a house, wife, children, money, and so on. To think that subtraction is going to help when addition does not is nothing but a lack of understanding. And if artha is like this, karma is the same. No pleasure is going to be lasting. Take music for instance. You buy a recording of a hit song. Why is this song a hit? Because, like a hitman, it knocks off all the other songs out of the running. Last month's hit song has been hit and is no longer a hit song. It only gathers dust on your tape deck. No one bothers about it anymore. Similarly, your attitude is always changing. What made you happy before no longer provides the same joy. You get tired of everything. Even if God were around you all the time, you would eventually want some privacy. This constant changing is natural because you are basically displeased with yourself. Therefore, you are pleased only now and then. The only silver lining in life is one's hope. This is all that keeps you going. Perhaps hope is nature's way of enabling you to survive so that you can discover nature herself.
So one couple of well, I guess I'll take some questions on what we looked at in this page, and then I do have a few comments. So any questions on this? Okay, so one thing that's important over here is we often try to gain freedom in two ways, really, which is through the fulfillment of ragas and dveshas. And so when I'm fulfilling a raga, both raga and dvesha, you can lump them into kama. But I think the raga and dvesha classification really helps because you're sort of bifurcating it into two different modalities and I suppose intentions behind it. So the thing that you want to surround yourself with, it could be again a thing, person, situation, whatever it may be. When you want to be in proximity to that object, that is raga. When the proximity of that object causes you anguish and you want it to be distanced from you, that is dvesha. Dvesha is basically a dislike for something, and raga is a like for something. Now, both of these together, you can say they are kama as a construct. But what's very important is, I've encountered this speaking to a lot of folks who are into the Vedanta study thing. They come from different walks of life, and we come to Vedanta from different directions, from different backgrounds, and for different reasons. I think we've covered this during our first session together. But sometimes, and I'm not saying it's not a legitimate reason, because every reason is legitimate, but sometimes the reason could be that one has become very disenchanted with life. It could be that, okay, you know what, your job is just very difficult. There's this whole 9 to 5 grind. Sometimes you have to work overtime. It's very taxing. Your health is compromised. Your stress levels are through the roof, and you just have a very difficult, overbearing boss who micromanages you and breathes down your neck every single day. And so life is just very difficult. And so suddenly you feel that I have some vairagya from work because I'm not so interested in it anymore. Or likewise, you could have a family member or a spouse or some domestic setup which is not really conducive to you feeling your whole self. And so again, that sense of being disenchanted with even family life can package itself in a form of vairagya. That this life gives me, what is this? It is all mithya, it is all maya. That is best to move away from the situation. And so we have to be very careful about this. My father was actually listening to one Swamiji today, Swami Siddharthananda ji, who's also a resident Acharya at Arsha Vidya. And so, very interestingly, like just before our satsang right now, I went downstairs to get a glass of water. And so, my father like removed his earphones, he was listening to the pravachan, and he's like, yeah, Swamiji talked about how people who are not ready for sannyasa, when they take sannyasa, it could, bring a lot of problems in their life because, first they were trying to deal with some issues that they hadn't really resolved. And they figured that, okay, you know what, if I don these ochre robes and, I leave things behind, my problems will also be left behind, but they follow you wherever you go because no matter how far you go, in whatever corner of the universe you go, you're still with yourself. And if you as the individual are not yet resolved, you will take those problems with you because all of the problems which are out there are now manifesting here, and those problems will haunt you day and night. And so sannyasa, or I guess more pertinent to our conversation, um, this sense of fleeting vairagya should not be mistaken for nishtha in one's Swarupa. I've tried to dissuade a lot of people who very prematurely, just because something bad happens in their life, they're saying, you know what, I'm ready to take sannyasa. I'm like, that's never a good reason to take sannyasa. That's a great reason to come to Vedanta because, who would come to Vedanta if things are going well? I mean, typically you need an impetus, some sort of excuse or some sort of reason to take up adhyatma. It could just be that there are certain occasions in life which aren't pleasing us anymore. It could be that, okay, one has been living a very hedonistic lifestyle and one questions what's the meaning of everything, or it could just be a very difficult time that one is having. Yes, you come to Vedanta for that, but you never go to sannyasa for that. I was also speaking to Swami Brahmaprajnanaji. This was perhaps 10 years ago, and I interviewed Swamiji back then when she newly took sannyasa diksha. And so I asked a very basic question, uh, which I didn't understand fully back then. But I said that, Swamiji, like, at what point do you decide to take sannyasa? Like, how do you go from, okay, now I'm a householder, now I'm a sannyasi, and what is that line in between? Like, what happens over there? And so Swamiji explained that, sannyasa is just the natural culmination of the nishtha that you've already been building for a long time. It culminates into sannyasa, and sannyasa seems to be the de facto um, thing to do. It seems like the natural thing to do. It's not really a choice you make, but it's sort of already made for you, given the fact that you are already so rooted in this teaching. So, likewise with Vairagya as well. In fact, there's a category of Vairagya called Smashan Vairagya. I might have spoken about this, maybe Nikita might remember in previous iterations of Satsanga. Smashan Vairagya, um, today, like so actually one of my colleagues at work, he lost his father this week. And so, I asked him how he was doing, and this was somebody that he had been estranged from for a period of, I would say, since childhood. He's not really interacted with his father, so he didn't really feel a sense of loss, but he seemed to be a little dismissive of the emotions that he was going through. And so he's like, yeah, it's a catch 22. I didn't really have a great connect with him. So yeah, there's some of that and this and that. So he kind of like tried to brush away the emotions, but his voice was heavy. And so obviously there was something going on. So again, it was a confusing state that he was in. But he was trying to justify that, okay, his father probably didn't mean a lot to him because of the estrangement and because of the lack of interactions and such, but somewhere it was weighing him down. And then he got emotional about something else that he was talking about, not his father but something else. And so it was pretty much a carryover of the first thing. And so what happens in these instances, like in this colleague's case, or like in the case of people when they lose a loved one, sometimes they'll go to the smashan. Smashan is your cremation ground, where you'll light, you'll set the body on fire and give it passage to the next life. And so over there you will see all your relatives, your people are weeping around you, and family and friends have gathered, and everyone's dressed in white, and there's this bright flame that's consuming your relative's body. And you begin to question things. You're like, "Arey, what is the purpose of life? You're just born and then you're gone, and in between there's this little bit of a fleeting moment which we call life." And then you'll start getting philosophical, and you'll start saying things that, and you'll start believing in yourself that, okay, I think I've made it, I think I've gained some maturity, now I'm ready to transcend to the next level, I'm ready to go into the atma. And then after a week, after 2 weeks, 3 weeks, as things settle down, and as sort of you come out of that denial state, uh, again, you'll go back to the old ways. And so this is called smashana vairagya, which is something like, we studied about magnetism in school. So you have two types of magnets. You have like induced magnetism and you have permanent magnets. And so induced magnetism is like, you have a magnet and you have these nails and other like iron whatever things, and they'll stick to the magnet, but those nails themselves will attain some magnetic properties in the proximity of a real magnet. And then when you take the magnet away, the nails lose their magnetism, right? So that is something like smashana vairagya. And then you have like a permanent magnet, which is, it's a permanent magnet, it doesn't lose its property. So that is like that vairagya, which is real vairagya, not that make believe vairagya. And so, when I read this part over here about, you know, now he is on another trip, a Swami Atmarama trip, that is also a trip sometimes. And so, today, some of us are very blessed. I know some of you all personally, we've met our teachers as well. And when we interact with these real deal sannyasis, the proper sannyasis, you can tell that, there is some um, tejas that they're exuding. There's some glow that they have. There's some nishtha, firmness, abidance in the knowledge, and they have done so much tapas, and there's so much tapas in their very being, that in their presence alone that this is the real deal. This is what a sannyasi is supposed to be like. So become very vigilant of this day-to-day affairs, that what are some things that I'm faking in my own I guess orientation towards shastra. Sorry about the interruption. I think Nikita, you were here. Any questions so far? No, good, can proceed.
Suppose those moments of pleasure, which are so few and far between, were denied to given a person. Suppose they were not there at all. Do you think a self conscious human being, the displeased human being, would want to live? He or she would surely commit suicide. And in spite of these moments of pleasure, if a person thinks there is no possibility of being happy, either because of a loss of some kind or an apprehension of some great calamity, the person would choose not to live. This is the thinking behind all suicides. Therefore, moments of pleasure are worthwhile because they keep you going. The hope is that you will discover that you do not need a mother in law to be displeased. You need only yourself. If you close the doors, you put aside the world and sit in an easy chair and try to be with yourself, then you will understand whether you are pleased with yourself or not. You will find that you do not require a world of perception, a world of books or anything to be displeased. All that you require is yourself. After a few minutes of sitting with yourself, you want to get up and go out or take a shower, anything other than sitting with yourself.
Okay.
Yeah.
Questions? Okay, we can continue.
The world is not the cause of your problems. To be displeased, then, requires nothing but yourself. It is not the world that displeases you. You are displeased with yourself, and whatever pleases you is going to be time bound, all of which we will see as we study the 18 chapters of the Bhagavad Gita. Because any karma, any pleasure you pick up is limited by nature in terms of time, content, and degree, the one who is displeased remains in spite of occasional moments of pleasure. Therefore, we have now discerned the problem to be the conclusion about myself that I am displeased. This is a fact that it is not going to be altered just because I pick up moments of pleasure. That I am insecure does not change merely because I acquire or give up certain securities. Thus, the only solution is to see myself secure and pleased with myself. But how is it possible to do this? If, with all these securities and pleasures, I am displeased with myself, how am I going to see myself pleased without them? This is where the teaching called Vedanta comes in and tells you that your problem is one of lacking something, but not of not knowing that you do not lack anything. It converts all pursuits into a pursuit of knowledge. In the vision of Vedanta, there is no reason for you to be displeased with yourself because you are totally acceptable to yourself, not in terms of attitude, but in reality. It is not a belief, it is in fact a discoverable fact. Only something that can be discovered is a fact, and the discoverable fact here is that you lack nothing. You are totally free. This is the vision of you, and this is the heart of Vedanta, the heart of this teaching. The problem that I lack is thereby converted into ignorance, the cause of which I do not know for the time being. Until I come to know, the vision assumes the status of a promise.
Okay, so this is beautiful, and there's quite a bit to chew on. So I'll hang on to this for a moment to see if someone has questions or comments. Mostly questions. Because this is really revealing what Vedanta is. The whole point of Vedanta is to free the individual. Okay, we can continue.
Shanji, one question.
Haji, yes.
Yes, uh, in life or in work, right? So you may be liking the environment wherein you are working, right? Suddenly, there is a feeling that okay, that you are not interested doing what you're doing there, right?
Hmm,
And is it because of the self or is it because of the environment around and the general, at least in my case, the case that I have is like
hmm,
moving away is one solution,
hmm,
okay, of that dislikement, or finding a solution around that is another solution. So
hmm.
I chose the first one. But is this realization also Vedanta, or like I am not getting that one? Uh, because the dislike that we have, right,
Hmm.
with some reason you have developed that dislike and then
Yeah.
you wanted to get rid
Ca-
of that
Can
situation.
we there are multiple ways to answer this, but could you mind actually giving the real life example that you're speaking of so that we can analyze the situation? If you like can speak in specific terms.
Okay, the specific terms is like the place where I am working.
Hmm,
I somehow started feeling insecure,
hmm,
and then uh, I the moving away is a part, like the decision that I took for resignation.
hmm,
uh, I could have done finding out the solution around and then doing it, but the decision that I took was moving away.
yeah.
But the circumstances with, by which I may have to make the decision are, from my point of view, I feel they are not in my hand.
Hmm.
But is it uh,
Yeah, yeah.
that realization, that realization, is it also Vedanta, or that feeling of insecure?
Hmm.
because of my situation, or like, or because of it is influenced by others,
Yeah,
I'm not able to come into terms with that feeling or that
yeah,
guilt feeling.
yeah. So I can definitely address this for I would say the next 5 to 10 minutes, and this is a very important question. So 1 second, let me stop presenting the screen because it'll be more interactive. Okay, so when we say is this Vedanta, let's start with that part because this is the easy one to deal with. No, it's not Vedanta. Vedanta is knowledge of the self. It has nothing to do with the decisions we make in life or why we make a certain decision or what the intention behind it is or what happens after that. All of that is in the realm of action, karma. When we talk about Vedanta, Vedanta is simply knowledge of the self. Atma Vidya, Brahma Vidya, that is the content of Vedanta, that is the fruit of the Upanishads, is the phalam of the teaching. Okay, so we have to separate what Vedanta is from this. Now, then the question is that if all of these things that we speak about are not Vedanta, then why are we studying all of these other topics in a Vedanta text? It's because to understand and to be able to assimilate the teaching of Vedanta, these things need to be sorted out first. It's more like suppose one has to learn how to fly, they need to first learn how to run, and before they learn how to run, they need to learn how to walk. Before walking, they need to learn how to crawl. So there's a paddhati, and so that basic preparation of the individual at the level of being a functionally put together person is a preparatory phase so that the Vedanta knowledge stays and it doesn't go away, and it doesn't remain like an intellectual fancy. Okay, so this part was the easy part, which is it is not Vedanta. But now, pertaining to the solution itself, to the problem that you posed, there are multiple ways to look at it. Okay, there are multiple ways to look at it. I will share some personal stuff also. I'll share based on the things that you stated as well. So this was about 2013, so about 11 years ago. I was probably like 24, 25, yeah, something like that. And I met Swamini Swatma Vedanta ji, that year for the first time, incidentally. And my interest in Vedanta was deepening. But I also had graduated from from college around that time, and I was looking for a job. And I got the first job, and I was already in it for a year. But I didn't enjoy that job at all. I despised it. I completely detested it because it wasn't the kind of thing that I would envision myself as doing. So, I tend to be analytical in nature and I like to see insights and other things. And this job was a bit more operational, and, it required me to sort of be on my toes quite often. And so, anyway, I was completely disenchanted. And so, because I was disenchanted, I couldn't really put my mind on the job, and I would do everything else except the job itself, basically. And so, that wasn't a great start to my career back then. But anyway, so then there was a camp that Swamniji was holding, and I already doubted my, I guess, my future or my future in that company because things weren't going very well. I wasn't sure what to do and whatnot. So in that camp, I met one person. I think at that point he was like the senior vice president of some other company. He was doing very well. So I thought that, okay, he seems like a congenial fellow. So let me confide in this issue, and maybe like as an elder, he must be in his 40s. I was in my early to mid 20s, and so maybe he could sort of mentor me and guide me because I was going through some crisis of sorts. And so I shared this problem with him. I said that, look, this is a big problem. I don't know if I can deal with it. I don't think I'm up for the job, and I don't feel I'm very competent at the work I do, and most of all I dislike it. And so I'm not sure where to proceed from here. It's- and so he said something very important, excuse me, that I'm trying to even follow today, which I don't think I'm doing a great job of it, but I'm trying. He said that suppose you quit the job and suppose you leave it and you find a different employer to work with. The problem that you're leaving behind is going to follow you. If it's a problem of being diligent, if it's a problem of being committed, if it's a problem of being focused, if it's a problem of having a dutiful attitude towards your job and whatever work it is that you're entrusted with, if those problems you're going to leave behind, they will still follow you with the next person, the third person, the fourth person. And so there are really two ways that he suggested, right? One is that you turn things around like 180 degrees and you become the individual that you want to become at your workplace. And you start sort of seeing things in a new light, and you start building yourself up from scratch, kind of like give yourself a fresh start of sorts. And if that doesn't seem like a very practical thing, because sometimes you've reached a certain threshold beyond which you can't rebuild your reputation, right? Like, I mean, once your reputation has been tainted over a number of months, it's very hard to recover from that. And then you're already trying to get out of a situation, but then there's this whole baggage that you have to also get out of and make amends with. And so I took the advice to heed, but at that point, I also decided that it doesn't seem that this may work out very well for me, just because of all of my past screw ups on the job. And so at that point, I decided that, okay, I should look out for a different one. But my next job, and thereafter, I ended up doing a decent I had a decent work ethic, relatively speaking. So that is one way to look at it, which is that, do I escape the situation, or do I deal with the problem? And it is usually advised to deal with the problem, which does not mean that you have to stay with the problem. It just means that, okay, while there is a problem, I try to sort it out. But it may so happen, like, let's say if there's a boyfriend girlfriend relationship, and if things aren't working out between the couple, you don't have to force yourself to remain in that relationship, even though you're giving your best. But if the other person's not able to sort of reciprocate, and things are not going in your favor, then you don't have to stick around, right? At that point, you can leave. But at least before you do decide to leave, you have to figure out, am I leaving because of my inadequacy, or because of the disconnect between myself and the setup? If it's an inadequacy, then I would say it is a good idea to give it some resolution, and then leave in a more dignified way. And if it is just an issue where, no matter what I do, this setup cannot be changed, or let's say it's a sunk cost, because there's a certain reputation that's been built and it cannot be, I suppose, changed anymore, in that case it is better to leave. So there are different complexities over here, but I would say that anytime one leaves, but if one leaves feeling that one has been underwhelming in the performance that they've delivered, and there is some insecurity and other such things, the problem with leaving is that insecurity will travel with you in the next job as well. And so, this is one problem. Now, okay, so I just want to divide this response into chunks, right? So one is that, okay, how do you practically approach it? If you see in the Gita, the whole beautiful allegory of the Gita applies to our day-to-day lives as well. Arjuna wanted to leave the battlefield. Krishna said, no, you fight a winning battle, you're a Kshatriya, it's your, goddamn right, and it's your duty to go and fight and slay the adharmis. Right? So he sort of, caught hold of his ear, and he's like, nope, I'm not letting you run away. You gotta stay here, because there was this battle cry that you gave before arriving on the battlefield, that, oh, I'm going to destroy these Kauravas. How dare they take away my land, and they take away what rightfully belongs to my ancestors and whatnot. And then on the eve of battle, just before we are ready to blow our conches and everybody's ready to you go crazy on one another, you suddenly chicken out. That doesn't work. And so there's then one has to ask oneself, that is this me leaving the battlefield because of the same reasons that Arjuna wanted to leave the battlefield, or am I leaving the battlefield because this is not a battle worth fighting? That could also be a reason. Sometimes there's a battle that's not worth fighting, and then you have to just pack your bags and then move to bigger and better things. Because one thing that I've learned, and perhaps some of you who've known me for long may probably have seen it, I used to pick a lot of battles or fights, on the internet a long time back, just to like defend Sanatana Dharma, and I'd argue with people and this and that. And I stopped doing that a couple of years back, because my wife Unnati also reminds me every now and then that pick your battles wisely. There are many battles you'll have to fight in life. Choose the opponents, choose your adversary. So again, like, again, it goes back to multiple choices, right? Like, first is, have I resolved my inadequacies before I leave the situation? Second, is this a battle worth fighting? And third, is the reason for me leaving because of some insecurity, because of some real situation and mismatch between me and the employer, me and the setup, which actually warrants that I should leave? Or a combination of all of these? And so when you break that problem down into, I suppose, multiple um, motivations as to why you're leaving, then you'll actually be able to work with those reasons thereafter. But now, given the fact that you've already quit your job, now we have to talk about the repercussions of that. And what I would say is that uh, it's very helpful, because I do this as well. In fact, when I was at the Gurukulam, there were certain things that were churning in my mind. And so, I will take a notepad or something, and I'll write it out. I'll write down if there's something I feel insecure about, if there's a thought that crosses my mind where I have dvesha bhava towards somebody, there's a bias that I have towards somebody because of something that they may have said to me, I will write it down and then I will try to work it out, because we are still all, work in progress, because we are sadhakas. And a very important trait of a sadhaka is to do this self reflection. And here, when I say self, I'm not referring to the atma, but I'm referring to the individual, right? Just as at my individual mind level, let me become so intimately aware of my flaws and my strengths. Let me become very aware of, my abilities and my inabilities. And once I'm aware of them, then I have an inventory of these things, and then I can decide, like, where I want to focus my energy and what I want to improve in myself as the individual, not atma. Atma can't be improved upon. Eventually, what happens is that as I have gained sufficient mastery over my functional reality, which is that my role as a member of society, as a member of my family, as somebody who is looked up to by their children, or as somebody who looks up to their own gurus and other role models, how do I place myself in this? I guess, I won't call it everything a battlefield, but how would I place myself in the world in a manner that I can look myself in the mirror and say, hey man, you've led a good life. This is a good life that has been led. These are, um, things that I would want to pass down to my children so that they can be proud of my um, actions. And, whatever it is, I can tell stories about my own life as in a biographical way to my grandchildren. So that's the life that we actually want to lead, and that requires a lot of introspection. There's one more thing. I know this to be true. I'm sure anybody who will think about it knows this to be true as well. Every individual wants to live up to the hero archetype. Somewhere deep down, there's nothing that gives us greater joy as we age, especially in our middle age and such, than having our children look up to us. And if we haven't lived or been the best possible person that we can be, given the situation, given the constraints, then there's always some sort of a gap that one will experience, and that often leads to a midlife crisis. Have you ever wondered why this crisis is not there in childhood, and it's not there in old age, but it's there in this sort of, I guess, 35 to 55-year-old period? Perhaps not 35, but sometimes it's more like 40 to 55. So, around that region. Sometimes it can start early, depending on how quickly you give rise to a family setup and such. But this midlife crisis happens because in our middle years, we are sort of sandwiched between two generations. You're sandwiched between your children and your parents. And now, as we age, our parents age faster. And so now this sense of responsibility creeps in, where now not only am I responsible for my children's education, their schooling, their grades, their tuitions, their this, that, drop them to this class, take them from that class. It's crazy. It's tough to manage children. But now the parents who had been there for us all along, now we have to manage them also, because suddenly their needs will have increased. Their, age will start to show. They may need more assistance, so on and so forth. And so one starts feeling squeezed in between. And that's still okay. That's still manageable. But what really takes a toll on us is that at that age, when one hits like 40, 45, something like that, 50 perhaps, I feel that sometimes even now, like 36. But you start feeling that, what have I done with my life? Have I led a good life? Have I really lived up to the life that I saw, that I envisioned for myself when I was young? Have I been the hero to the younger version of me? That the younger version of me can look up to me today and say, what? This is exactly where I wanted to be at your age. Right? So that archetype, if it's not fulfilled, it can create a lot of anguish. And so how do we really fulfill, and walk in the shoes of that hero archetype? By being what Ram Bhagwan was. Beautiful this is. If you see the Ramayana, it starts with a description of all of the traits of Ram Bhagwan. This is a conversation between Narada Muni and Valmiki ji, right? So this conversation is okay. Is there such a person who has all of these gifts? He's strong, and he's handsome, and he's respectable, and he's learned. He's a master of the Vedas. He's a defender of the dharmis. He's uh, he's a nightmare to his enemies. He's valorous, he's powerful, he's this, he's that, he's got broad shoulders. He's got long arms, Bahubali. Not this stupid movie, but actually, like, the one with very strong and muscular arms. Like, all of these descriptions are given for Ram Bhagwan: broad shoulders and this and that and all. And they're describing this perfect person, this perfect archetype who can shoulder any responsibility in life. He's the perfect child, he's the perfect husband, no matter what feminists say, which they don't have anything else to do, but he's also the perfect husband, he's the perfect brother, he's the perfect king, he's the perfect student, he's the perfect teacher, he's the perfect everything. There's not a single blemish on Ram Bhagwan, his character. And if we can start trying to walk in his shoes. And then you ask yourself, what would Ram Bhagwan have done in this situation? If Ram Bhagwan were my colleague at work, what would he have done in my place? If Ram Bhagwan were, you know, in a certain situation, what would he have done? And so once we begin to merge our story with the archetype of the avatara, then you begin to embody those traits, and those the Devi Sampatihi start getting endowed in us as well. And when that happens, we've made it. Vedanta is not very far away from there, by the way. Once this um, functional identity has been, mm, I guess, coated with titanium, so to speak, in a way that is unbreakable and it is so sound, it is so robust, then that person is also extremely capable of studying Vedanta. I know we've gone to these things about childhood and other things in the past as well, but it's also worth mentioning that you usually start with a high level of security as a child. Recently I'm going to share something very interesting that happened, and I'll connect it to just a second. No? Give me a moment. This is sort of pertinent to what we were speaking about. So there was a post, and LinkedIn has this whole clap yourself on the back type of post, which self congratulatory post, which I don't like at all. And so somebody made a post about how there was one successful female entrepreneur whose father, when she was around 5 years old, the father used to critique, not criticize, but critique. Though I think it's critical, unfortunately. He used to ask her the question: "Is this world class?" So suppose she would make a drawing, then he would ask her, "Is this world class? If it's not world class, is it worth doing?" Suppose she would engage in some activity, then he'd be like, "Is this world class?" Right? And so she credited this for her success, or whatever, entrepreneurial success. And I think that's a terrible thing to do. And I just wrote something about it, and then I got an immediate response from a person who went through something similar. So let me share that with you. Let me come back to tie it back to your question, what I mean. So uh yes, here it is. Yeah, what I said is this world class is not a question I would ever ask my 5-year-old, or for that matter, any other child. It's the perfect recipe to ingrain insecurity and a false sense of perfectionism, as opposed to a process of discovery and inquiry. It can, and often I've seen that it has, led to an inability to deal with failure when perfection is dangled as an ideal before us. A parent or teacher has an innate sense of the range of capacities that child or student is endowed with. It is our duty to encourage them to bring out the best that they are capable of, nurture a love for the subject or activity they are engaged in, and teach them to be resourceful, diligent, and not settle for anything less than the best that they themselves are capable of. But world class is pushing it too far. And while I cannot speak to this lady or others like her, notwithstanding their obvious material success, I do not have any deep insights into how at peace and content their minds are. And no, It's not the type of parenting I would endorse or embrace. And so one person responded that, yep, I entirely agree from my lived experience. 9 out of 10 was never good enough results for one of my parents and was not rewarded. It destroyed me into my 40s it took a lot of therapy to explore and understand how perfectionist parenting coupled with actively closing doors to opportunities ruined the first half of my working life. If you keep quiet and do a world class job, the only person who knows you're world class is you. So, when we talk about Ram Bhagwan also, if you see the way he was raised, he was given a lot of love, a lot of affection by his entire family, and he was the beloved of the entire kingdom. His brothers respected him, everybody respected him. So when this respect and when this adoration and when this validation flows into you, you cannot but become successful in life. But when that thing is sort of like pushed or forced upon a child, they may appear materially successful. They may appear to do very well in their college. They'll get a high SAT score. They'll have a good, education. They'll get a good first paying job. But internally, we don't quite know how broken they might or might not be. Right? It again depends on prarabdha, but there is a high possibility that something is broken inside. And this tends to be often the case with the current high performers or high achievers. Today I read a piece of news. There's some Indian guy. He was 25 years old and he committed suicide. Um, and he worked. He was 25. He had a 30 lakh package working in Mumbai or somewhere in India. And he worked for McKinsey company as a consultant. And a person who would look at him from the outside, let's say if you were uh, the parent of some girl who was looking to get married, and you looked at this guy as a prospective groom, and you'd be like, oh, wow, IIT education. He was IIT educated. Then he went to IIM to do his masters, which is again like top class. Then he went to McKinsey, which is arguably the best consulting firm in the world. And then you have like a 30 lakh salary in your first job. And then you have all of these accolades, and then he had a large following on LinkedIn. Yeah, you can check the profiles. You can Google the news also. It came out today only. So all of these things were there. And you'd be like, this is the perfect person to get my daughter married to. But the person was broken. And so, he came home from work one day from this very, I suppose, intensive assignment or consulting project that he was working on. And he couldn't take it and he jumped off the ninth floor balcony because he just couldn't take it. And this is what life really is. This is how success. This is not success. This is corporate success. This is the fake level of success that today we've learned to value. But true success is, again, going back to Vedanta, what we looked at in the earlier pages, which is that how can I be with myself and be comfortable with who I am? And the only way one can be comfortable with who one is really a two-step process. So, of course, there are many steps in these two steps, but the first step is, can I become comfortable based on my functional identity as a member of my family, society, blah, 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 blah. Second, having gained that composure and some relative sense of uh, a sense of healthy ego, can I transcend that through the study of Vedanta, where I drop all of these identities away? If you try to drop your identities before you gain some relative competence over them, you will fail not only in life, but you will fail in Vedanta also. That is a tragedy. Um, I'm struggling through these things myself as well. There are many things that I'm trying to deal with right now, and I know that I need to cross a few bridges before Vedanta starts working for me. Better and better and better, and I can see some improvements and some concerns also with my own progress, because you have to be vigilant about this. Swamini Brahma Prajnanaji also told me this a very long time back, that you don't mistake exposure for knowledge, because I felt back then that I had a lot of exposure to the teachings and I could talk about Vedanta. I could talk about it extempore and give a short speech if I had to, and all of these things. It was very easy for me to talk about Vedanta. But based on the diagnosis of the acharyas, who obviously know much better than I do, there was a appropriate suggestion that gain a better functional identity over who you are, and don't be too quick to jump into Brahma Vidya until You have gained some sufficient relative competency across multiple areas of your life. And how do you do that? Again, going back to this whole thing, put Ram Bhagwan as your archetype template for how you want to live life. I tend to do it with Puja Samaji actually, which is that sometimes the worst of me escapes. This samatvam is not there, and so I will often ask myself the question, because especially the internet is very tempting. You want to say something rude to somebody who may have distorted a version of like Hindu history and whatnot. So I'll be like, okay, what would Puja Swamiji do? How would he respond to the situation? And then immediately that puts me back in my place. And it makes me more rational, it makes me more composed. And so slowly what happens is, if what ABC archetype, Ram Bhagwan, Puja Swamiji, Krishna Bhagwan, Adi Shankaracharya, whoever it may be, some great Mahatma, the closer our actions and our natural inclinations match up to theirs, the greater is our relative success in life. And you will also find that if you were to map this, if you were to do a scatter plot, again, x axis by relative functional well being, y axis by assimilation of Vedanta, you will see that there is a correspondence between the two. There's a strong linear correlation between these two modalities: functional reality and Vedantic self. Okay, there's one more, I'll share one more, like again, all anonymized stuff, right? But there was one more lady. She was in her 50s, and so she reached out to me with some Vedanta stuff. This must be again 6, 7, 8 years, 9 years back, something like that. And she said that she wants to study Vedanta. So I said, okay, study Vedanta. What's wrong in that? No problem. And then she said, I just want to study Vedanta. I don't want to do anything else. I said, but you have a family, no? You have to take care of people and all. She said, yeah, but I don't, Vedanta is more important, I think. I said, okay, if you think so. But then, the Vedanta was not consistent. It wasn't clear. She was not very qualified to understand Vedanta. Forget assimilate. Understanding where there was a lot of gadbad. So I said, okay, let's take a few steps back. Let's work on some of the sadhana chatushtaya things. Let's figure out because it seems that you're coming to Vedanta to escape something. I just want to understand more about like your background. And so then it all came out, right? Okay, my husband is a terrible person. My father was horrible. My mother was horrible. My brother, I don't have a good relationship with him. My children hate me. We don't have good profession. We are monetarily there's some issue. This that all these issues came out. And I said, that is why Vedanta is not working. I'm not saying this to guilt trip you in any way that you should be a certain way for Vedanta to work. Rather, what I was saying to her is more like, fix these things before you come to Vedanta so that Vedanta will bear fruit. And so then we got on this whole process of, okay, how do I fix these different areas of my life? And to the extent that we could work some of those things out, we did. And the places where after a point it's up to the individual, right? So again, like, this is where I would say that functional wholeness is very important. So okay, so any questions here? I know we've covered a, a lot of ground, like psychology and Vedanta and maturity and sadhana chatushtaya and all of these things, but I'm happy to take some questions, or if not, we can proceed a little bit with the reading.
Thank you, Prashant ji.
Sure. Does this give more perspective into, like, how to look at the problem and fine tune it?
Yeah, I think now that the decision has been made, I took what you have covered, like identify the points, the strengths, weakness, and other things, and then see how we can work towards bettering those weaknesses.
Yes. And this helps. Right. Once you start writing it down, it helps a lot.
Thank you, Ji.
Okay. Sure. Okay. Let's continue. Uh, where were we, Nikita? This is one thing I'm very, very bad at. Like, I never remember where we were. Oh, it's here, right? That you are the problem, you're the solution.
Yeah, right. You are the problem, you are the solution. Vedanta defines the problem as not what you lack, but that you lack, and says that you are the solution because you are the problem. There are two types of problems. One has its solution outside the problem, and the other has its solution within the very problem itself. The solution to the problem of feeling cold, for example, is outside the problem in the sense that you have to cover yourself to go to the fireside or go out into the sun. You may even decide to go to the Bahamas. When the solution to the problem is outside, it means that you have to do something to solve the problem. If hunger is your problem, you have to feed the hunger by eating food, which is also outside. The solution to a jigsaw puzzle, however, is within the problem, within the puzzle itself. Because the solution is within the problem, there is no problem in fact. The only problem is you, and the solution is also you. When you do not understand something, it is a problem for you, whereas when you do understand, there is no problem. The
Okay.
understand, yeah, the understanding is the solution. In the vision of Vedanta, you have no problem in fact.
Uh,
Then you may ask, pause.
yeah, just a quick point here. Um, because this part is very important, and I guess what do you see here? What do you pick up? Something that seems like okay, but what is the connection between the problem and the solution? And anyone can answer that. Okay, so one thing that I see here is the solution has to overlap with the problem for the problem to go away. If you think about it, there's suppose we talk about hunger. There's a locus of hunger, right? And so where is that locus of hunger? Usually it's in our stomach because when food enters the stomach, the problem of hunger is gone. But then if you talk about the locus of poverty, right? Okay, it's your bank balance. And so when that bank balance is replenished, poverty is gone. Usually a problem has a certain locus, and the solution has to overlap with the locus for the problem to disappear. Does that make sense? And
That it
so,
coincide.
sorry, go ahead.
Mean that it has to coincide.
Exactly. Yes, it has to coincide. That's a better way to put it, in fact. Okay, so it has to coincide. The problem has to coincide with the solution for both the problem and the solution to go away. Very beautiful, no? Problem is the solution is there only till there's a problem, and when there's a solution, there is neither a solution or a problem. Have you noticed that? A solution and problem dichotomy is only there while I am in the pursuit of solving the problem. Once I've solved the problem, there is no problem and there is no solution. It's very interesting. One doesn't think about and so this is one tip I want to give people as they live life. It's something I want to tell myself as well. Just one clear note that whatever I share in the group is like more or less an auto suggestion about like how Prashant should live a better life too. So it's not like I've made any level of success there, but if you really think about it, when especially if you're living like in this corporate life and or an academic life for that matter, and again this goes back to Shishi Kumarji's questions as also, right? That that sense of insecurity. I have it, you have it, everybody has it in this call. I don't think anybody is free of insecurity. We wouldn't be wasting our time otherwise with Vedanta. We'd be very secure and we'd be in Anandam only, nothing more. But as long as this insecurity is there, what it ends up doing to us is it makes us very solution minded. That's a problem. We are always looking to improve, we are always looking for better, we are always looking to optimize. These go-getter people in life, there's this go-getter mentality that once one problem is solved, let's move on to the next one, and let's move on to the third one, and the fourth one, and the fifth one. And then we get into this constant loop of making life better, making ourselves better also as individuals. And so what I'm saying right now may sound like it is in direct contradiction to what I said like 3 minutes or 4 minutes back, which is that we have to be self-introspective, we have to reflect, and we have to like solve our functional, problems of functional reality. But we can't obsess over that either. We have to take it slowly, and we have to be kind to ourselves, because I forget Vasu might remember this, that somebody asked a question during Satsanga and Asha Vidya. And I believe it was Swami Muktatmanda ji or perhaps Swamini ji, but I think Muktatmanda ji responded. Somebody asked, what is the biggest hurdle to a student of Vedanta when they start off, or something like that? Okay, I don't remember the exact details of the question. But the answer is this: when you're not kind to yourself, this self loathing that one has for oneself, that is one of the biggest obstacles. And so we have to be very cognizant that while I am on a process of self improvement as a sadhaka, as per the vision of Vedanta, I am complete. These two things have to be simultaneously kept alive, and it is not always easy to do. There's one side of me which says that, hey Prashant, you're not good enough. Oh, look at where you are in your career. Look at where you could have been if you had applied yourself. I last year, two, three, four, I think 4 years back, or perhaps I don't know where it was, but around that region, I was going through this whole crisis, and I wish I had really applied myself. I wish I had, chosen something, made some other better choices, and I would be in a very different place right now. I wish I studied harder in school. I wish I studied harder in college. I wish I really put myself to use. And uh, things were troubling me back then. As I think about it now, it's like, okay, there are other problems I might have, but this is not one of them right now. You have to balance the fact that there is a certain lack that I have functionally, and that lack I have to work on improving as an individual, with the fact that I am not an individual at all, and there is nothing I lack, because all that there is nothing but Ishwara. It is only Ishwara. So sometimes this can put a person in conflict when they're studying Vedanta, because they'll be like, okay, it's like Krishna Bhagavan and Arjuna Samvada, where Krishna Bhagavan says something, but then Arjuna is like, oh, but you said this before, and now you're saying this. Tell me which one is true. Give me just one thing so that I can stick to it. मुझे इतना confused क्यों करते हैं? मुझे एक चीज बता. First, Krishna Bhagavan says there's nothing superior to knowledge. Then he says, oh, Arjuna, now I want you to fight the battle also. So then Arjuna's like, wait, what is this? You told me that all that matters is self-knowledge, but now you're also extolling action. On the one hand, you say knowledge is actionless, nishkarmya, without action. On the other hand, you're saying action is superior to inaction. Chapter 2 or 3 is there, no? Action is superior to inaction. Make up your mind, Krishna Bhagavan, I'm very confused. So, this is a very common confusion. It can happen to us also. And that is why it is important to remember that whenever a certain Upadesha is given, what is the Tatparyam? What is the place it's coming from? When we talk about self improvement, we are not talking about knowledge, we are talking about action. We are not talking about knowledge at all. And here, the self, when we are talking about, is not the Atma, we are talking about the Jiva. And what do I mean by action and not knowledge? Knowledge liberates, action prepares. Always important to keep these two things in mind. There are only two modalities through which we operate in the world. Only two modalities. We either gain knowledge from the world. Light is falling into my eyes is knowledge. Sound is entering my ears is knowledge. That I feel some tactile touch when I touch my mouse or my keyboard is knowledge. This is all sense input. Sense input is knowledge only. It is not action, it's knowledge. Every moment I'm living with one, knowledge, or two, actions. Is there a third? There isn't. So all improvement, self improvement, is actually not Atma improvement, it is individual improvement. Health, fitness, intelligence, emotions, emotional management, all of these things at the level of the mind and the body. Self knowledge Vedanta at the level of Atma, because it is who you are. It is revealing the self to the self as the self, that you are this self. So there's nothing more to speak about that. But these two things have to be handled simultaneously, and one should never be confused for the other. If suppose you confuse the individual and say that, okay, the self has to be improved upon, and you take that to be the self, then that implies that the Atma is imperfect and it has to be perfected. Bye bye to Vedanta. Suppose you say that, oh, there is only the self, there's no action at all, so there's nothing to do at all, then functionally you will lose in life. Because it will be like Arjuna sitting on his chariot and not shooting arrows. And he'll be shot and he'll die. Then we'll stop drinking water, we'll stop eating food because it's all mithya. So the individual, the way to marry these two perspectives together is that they are not, first of all, contradictory perspectives, but they are the whole, they are the total. The Paramathika Satta, the actual reality is that you are nothing but the Atma, there's nothing other than the Atma. This is a fact of life. But also, there's another Mithya Jagat that we are operating through, which gives rise to this apparent duality. Now, if one person says it's apparent duality, why bother? Because it's apparent. It's apparent because you are as though an agent of action and you are as though a repository of knowledge. Knowledge is entering and actions are being done. And so there is an agent who's responsible for these actions. Ultimately, we'll see that all of this, agency is Ishvara's only, it's not really ours. But slowly and steadily, this will be transcended and it will all merge into Ishvara only. Our whole sense of being will be identical with Ishvara. And that is the goal, and that goal should never ever be um, missed. And so, while I perform my actions, while I do well at my job, while I act as a decent, responsible family man, while I act as a responsible member of society, while I go and be a good neighbor to my neighbors, all of these things I do, I should not lose the vision that I am the self, I am the Atma, I'm not the doer, I'm not the neighbor, I'm not the husband, I'm not the son, I'm not the parent, I'm not the voter, I'm not the employer, I'm not the employee. One should not lose the vision that I am not any of these things, and yet these things are roles that I have to play. And so Pujya Swamiji says A equals B, but B does not equal A. A equals B, B does not equal A. The role is the self, but the self is not the role. The actor is James Bond, but James Bond is the actor, but the actor is not James Bond. That's the way to put it. Because if James Bond dies in the movie as he did in the last film, the actor Daniel Craig is still alive, right? And so whatever happens to the role does not impact who you are. It does not impact the Atma. And so all conditioning and all improvements are on the role. It's not on the self. So that those are two perspectives that have to be kept alive. Um, and so we'll look at this page 19. You are the probably you're the solution next time. But any questions before we close for today? I'll give it like 15 seconds to see if someone has questions. Okay, none. So let us close and yeah, thank you all for joining. See you next week. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namah Hari Om. One quick note, Swamini Swatmavinanda ji is going to be conducting some satsangas this weekend. And so I'll send out the flyer or I guess joining details in the WhatsApp group. But please attend to based on your availability. Please do. She's a fantastic teacher, and whatever I know is nothing compared to what she knows. So do that. Namaste. Thank you, everyone. Namaste.